Hello, my name is Melissa, your host of NABORHood News. Today, I am on a Zoom call with Wink News meteorologist Matt Devitt. Matt, thank you so much for agreeing to be a part of our show.
Absolutely.
Before we dive into your presentation on hurricanes, could you please tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, sure. I have loved weather ever since I was 7 years old. It's kind of one of those things I've always felt that's always made sense, and I, to continue that passion, did the high school science fair projects, and then after that point, went to Penn State University, got my meteorology degree there, and really learned about all types of different crazy weather, from snow, tornadoes, to sure enough hurricanes. And my first TV job was in Tornado Alley, kind of in the middle of nowhere. Oftentimes, when it comes to TV, you start small and you're in these, kind of lower end markets. And yeah, it was a great learning experience. Made mistakes, learned from them, and kind of grew as a meteorologist. And from there, went to Arkansas, went to Georgia, and then now my fourth stop has been here in Florida, and that's where I was born and raised. For me, this is home. And I've been here at Wink for almost 5 years, and I've really enjoyed it.
Awesome.
So yeah, it's a job that the thing that I love doing is not only do I get to do what I love, but especially in situations where maybe the weather, can turn downhill, especially with hurricanes. I like to be the one that can provide information in a calming sense and an informative sense. So that way people can get what they need to know to protect their friends and their family. Because, as we know nowadays, whether it's Facebook, whether it's TV, Twitter, anything, Instagram, there are different ways of getting your information, but is it factual? Does it have the hype? Does it not have the hype? And that's the one thing that I always try to do is I want to get the information out there and everything that you need to know, but without the hype.
Yes, I think that's very important.
Yeah.
So if you want to start, and I'll go
Sure.
back sharing your screen there.
Absolutely. Well, so the big thing that I would like to do today is we'll talk about storms from the past, the current Atlantic hurricane season that we're in, and also based off of all that, we can kind of prep everybody for future storms. Heaven forbid that we do encounter them. It's kind of the reality of where we live here, especially in Florida, that we've had hurricanes in the past, and we will continue to have hurricanes in the future. It's the problem when you're a peninsula and you jut right out into the Gulf of Mexico and the Atlantic, and we will have more storms in the future. But if you have a plan and if you prep properly, you can tackle these storms, whether they're small or big or weak or strong. So one of the storms that we had a few years ago, as we know if you were here, it was Hurricane Irma.
Cannot forget.
Yeah, and Hurricane Irma, how was your experience with that?
So I evacuated, and I kind of actually regret evacuating. Not so much leaving the state. It wasn't bad getting out, left in the middle of the night. It was coming back because we wanted to come back. We wanted to make sure that the house was okay and, see all the damage. And we were going back when everyone else was going back. And right when it was actually hitting about to hit the Georgia area. So you're driving through Georgia and all of their exits are closed, couldn't get gas. Yeah. And then finally we were able to find gas in Florida, the first exit there. But it was crazy to get home there. On the highway, people were pulled over, they ran out of gas. Just was not a fun situation, especially going to the rest stop there. Ooh.
Oh yeah. And I can definitely relate. So in 2005, I evacuated for Hurricane Rita when I was living in Houston, Texas. And this was the hurricane after Katrina. So Katrina scared everybody after what it did to New Orleans. And what happened was, long story short, Rita was actually Category 5, just like Irma at one point. And after seeing what happened to New Orleans with Katrina, everybody evacuated Houston, which is the fourth largest city. People were evacuating who didn't have to evacuate. Normally when you evacuate, it's because you're in a life-threatening situation. And for example, it mainly is if you're in a flood-prone area for storm surge. If you're close to the coastline, You do not want to see a storm surge of 10 to 20 feet flood your home and, again, potentially put you in a life-threatening situation. So that's why people evacuate. Well, the problem is, whether it was with Irma or with Rita, sometimes you get people who are just, they get nervous and scared of the wind threat when, they're 40 miles inland and they're not going to be threatened by the surge, but they're worried about the wind. So they evacuate, and they can sometimes clog the roads for people that legitimately have to evacuate because they cannot be a mile away from the shore if there's 20 feet of storm surge coming. So that's why you had the experience that you did with Irma. I had the experience with Rita. And what's crazy with my hurricane is that we dodged a bullet. It eventually curved north towards Louisiana. They got the worst part of the storm. But the evacuation was so bad that I believe it was over 90 or 100 people died during the evacuation, which was more than the actual hurricane itself when it made landfall. It was over 100 degrees. People were running out of gas. It was just an absolutely terrible situation. And there's a few things that we'll talk about here throughout the presentation where, we can determine, should I evacuate or should I not evacuate? And if I do, when do I do it?
Yes.
So we can definitely dive into that as we go throughout the presentation. But, Irma, and here's why, especially if you lived along the coastline, why you did need to evacuate. I mean, at one point, this was a real beast, a monster of a storm. 180 mile per hour winds during its peak, $65 billion in damage, and it did kill 138 people. And the big thing with Irma, it was not only the strong wind. I mean, this was just a monster of a storm. Look at the comparison to Hurricane Andrew, which was a Category 5. I mean, it was literally double the size. Mm-hmm. So this was actually me the morning of Hurricane Irma's landfall. So it made two landfalls. The first one was in the Florida Keys, and that's when it was at its strongest point. It was a Category 4. And if you're new to Florida, if you've just moved here, we measure the intensity of a hurricane based off of this Category 1 to 5 scale. So at one point, Irma was a 5. When it made landfall in the Florida Keys, it was a 4. Then it, I hate using the word weakened, but it wasn't at its strongest point when it did approach Marco Island, but, it was still a Category 3. It was a 115 major hurricane. And that led to some pretty significant impacts here across Southwest Florida. But look at the scope, of this hurricane. Literally went from Cuba all the way at one point to Georgia and South Carolina. It was just an incredibly big storm. And although the official strongest winds from the storm was 115 sustained, we had wind gusts in Naples as high as 142. And look at what that did to some of the homes that were in its path. I mean, either near devastation or complete devastation. And unfortunately for him, he had to rebuild. Mm-hmm. So it's not only the wind threat that we have to deal with. Here's that life-threatening storm surge that with Irma, we dodged a bullet with. We got so lucky. I mean, this could have been so much worse. And what happened was this storm at the last minute, when it was making that approach towards our area, it shifted 30 miles to the east. Now that means everything for what we would see with storm surge. So normally the worst storm surge is right on the eastern side and the right side of the eye, because you got the strongest wind, and wind is essentially a force, and it was forcing water from the Gulf up on land. Now the one area that did not get lucky, and they saw the surge, was southern Collier County and Monroe County. So that's basically from Marco Island to Everglades City. And look at the pictures. And this is why, you do need to evacuate if you live close to the beach and within a storm surge area. And that's why they have the different storm surge areas, and they will issue a mandatory evacuation. It's because of scenes like that. Mm-hmm. So another issue, you can get flooding from tropical systems in two ways. So we mentioned a second ago the saltwater flooding from the surge, but you can also get the heavy rain, the freshwater flooding. And this picture was actually in Buckingham. So literally in northeastern Lee County, they had so much rainfall, like 8 to 14 inches. they just couldn't take it. And look at this flooding. I mean, it was absolutely ridiculous. You know, those must be some really good shoes. I always make that joke, you know, showing this picture. But, you know, the other thing is you never want to do that because you don't know what's in the water. There could be water moccasins, there could be gators, there could be fire ants, you name it. And that's just one of the many threats that we see with landfalling tropical systems. So Irma was in 2017. A year later, we had Hurricane Michael make landfall in the Florida Panhandle, and this one was even nastier. This was a mean, mean storm, and this was actually the first Category 5 to make landfall in the United States since Hurricane Andrew in 1992. And this was a powerful, devastating storm to the Florida Panhandle. The max winds were 160. So, Melissa, I think the biggest message here with this presentation is this graphic right here. This is probably the most important graphic that I have. And initially, when you look at it, you're probably saying, well, you know, why is that? Okay, so let me kind of walk through this graphic, and here's why it's so important. And this is a reason why even before hurricane season starts, you want to have a plan, and it's because of storms like Michael. So, for example, if you look at the bottom hand portion of your screen, on October 7th of 2018, it developed. Okay, so October 7th, look at just 3 days later. 3 days, that's all it took. It made landfall as a 5. It went from a nothing to an unbelievable strongest hurricane to make landfall in the United States in 25 years, you know, plus in just 3 days.
Yeah, that's
isn't that crazy? It went from a nothing to a monster of a storm in just 3 days. I mean, how do you feel about that?
That's the one thing. It's so unpredictable.
Yeah, I mean, you can literally get these storms that they go from disorganized scattered rain storms to forming into a tropical storm, a hurricane, and then where you see the pink line and the purple, that's that major hurricane, Category 5 strength. So, you know, from a nothing to a something in 3 days, you know, that's why you really, really, really want to have that hurricane plan well before the hurricane season even starts.
Now, I'm sorry, Matt, can you go back a second? With Michael?
Sure.
Did we know that it was going to be hitting the Panhandle? Like that was the directed path always, or did it look like it was going to turn?
It was targeting the northern Gulf, but we didn't really know until about 2 days out that it was going to be specifically, you know, maybe a day and a half to 2 days out, that it was going to be targeting Panama City, Mexico Beach, and the raw power of this storm. I mean, check this out. We mentioned the storm surge, and that's that water level rise from the Gulf. If you can see this on your screen, look at the storm surge difference in this part of the storm. So, for example, the line is where it made landfall, the red line. To the right of the eye is where you have the worst effects, strongest wind, and also where you would see the most surge. Look at that, 19.1 feet of a water level rise from the Gulf of Mexico. I mean, literally, that's like 3 of you and I above our heads. Like, that's how high the water was coming in. Now, not to say that you can't get surge on the west side and the left side, but it's not as severe. You know, still it was 12 feet, and this was near a Tyndall Air Force Base. And just that's one of the many threats if you decide to stay and not evacuate, especially if you live along the coastline, that you may have to deal with these powerful storms. So here's a before and after of what Michael's storm surge and the wind did to the coastline near Mexico Beach. Look at the before, and we pointed out one home. This is a well-constructed home, but look at the rest. I mean, pulverized from hours and hours of relentless wind, rain, and surge. It also has the power to alter coastlines. This is a little sliver. Let me actually go back. I'll show you where it is. See the sliver of land? It's south of the word Mexico Beach and just to the left of Port St. Joe. You see that sliver of the land that juts out? Mm-hmm. Look what Michael did to the coastline. It broke it in half. I mean, it literally has the power to alter coastlines. And that's what we had here in Southwest Florida with Hurricane Charlie in 2004. It broke North Captiva into 2, And sometimes that's what you can get with these powerful storms. Now, last year, Hurricane Dorian was a hurricane that I have never seen, to where you have this mean, powerful storm, and then it hits the brakes. And that's what it did as a monster Category 5 to the northern Bahamas. And it literally, can you imagine dealing with a Category 5 for 24 to 36 hours? I mean, in many cases, it almost wiped them off the face of the map. I mean, they were inundated with storm surge as much as 15, 20 feet plus. Look at the max winds, 185. I mean, it was an absolutely terrible storm. And here's actually what it looked like when it was approaching Great Abaco Island. And it was one of those storms where you had 185 mile per hour winds. Then the sun came out, they were in the eye, and then they got hit again. I mean, how ominous is that shot as it worked its way through? So now let's talk about this year. And already we have seen a major hurricane make landfall. I mean, this was literally last week. Yeah. And this was a storm, Melissa, same thing. We had a long time to watch it, but it really wasn't until the Gulf that it blew up and it got strong. And they are still without power across parts of southwestern Louisiana. They've even been describing it for parts of that area, especially Lake Charles towards Cameron, Louisiana. It's a humanitarian crisis right now because they're not getting the resources that they need, at least at the moment. Now they are getting help, but there's only so much that they can do in a short amount of time to get the power back on, for everybody to get the food that they need, clean water. And that's something that you have to deal with if you decide to stay immediately after a landfalling hurricane. And the other thing is Lake Charles and Cameron, their heat index, what it feels like after the hurricane, 100 to 110. That's what it's felt like. And if this storm knocks out your power, which it did to 500,000 people, they don't have AC to cool themselves down. So that's just, one of the many things to factor in if you decide to stay with a powerful hurricane on the way. Here is going to be one of the pictures of the storm surge just last week from Cameron, Louisiana. This is where it made landfall. And the destruction was amazing. It was significant. And look at all that flooding from the Gulf. I mean, this wasn't a few years ago. This was literally last week. And this was a shot from one of the helicopters that passed by. Okay, so we've talked about the past, we've talked about the present. What can we expect for the rest of the season? Well, this is from, and everybody always jokes, why do we have hurricane experts in Colorado? They're not even close to the water.
I was thinking that.
Right, isn't it interesting? They are, believe it or not, they are some of the most brilliant atmospheric scientists that we have, and just so happens that they picked Colorado. Isn't that funny? And they, for this year, they are expecting, and this has kind of been the case so far, a very hyperactive season. So normally, and you can see that on the left column, we see 12 tropical storms in a given year. We see about 6 to 7 hurricanes, and we see about 2 to 3 major hurricanes. Now, a major hurricane is Category 3 and above. So that's kind of the upper end caliber, extremely devastating storms. And normally we see about 2 to 3 of those every single year. Now, that doesn't mean that we see 2 to 3 making landfall, but we see 2 to 3 of those Category 3 and above. Look at the forecast for this year. 24 is what they're expecting after it's all said and done. Tropical storms, 12 hurricanes, and 5 of those could be the Category 3 and above. Now, with Laura last week making landfall, now that's 1 out of 5 for the year. So here's actually how we're doing so far. And actually, Melissa, let me go back. You're probably wondering, why do they have the hyperactive season that they're calling for? What are they looking at for that? Well, one of them right out of the gates is going to be warmer than normal water temperatures. When you have warmer than normal water temperatures, and especially if they're well into the 80s, that's the power and the fuel to get these storms going. Also, if you have a lot of tropical moisture, which, when they're in the Gulf of Mexico, the Caribbean, and the Atlantic, they will oftentimes see a lot of that. What does hurt development is Saharan dust. It's very dry. That's been swirling around at times the past few weeks and months. That can temporarily hurt their strength, but oftentimes when you get into September and October, you kind of fight away at least most of that dust. But the big thing is, do we have an El Nino or do we have a La Nina? So an El Nino, if we have that, is actually good for us. It's bad for the tropics. It's good for us. So when you have an El Nino, that increases what we call wind shear. And wind shear, these tropical systems, they don't like that. So when you have an El Nino, you have greater wind shear, and oftentimes, not only does that lower the intensity of tropical storms and systems, but it also can lower the number. The problem is, Melissa, this year we have the exact opposite. We have what we call a La Nina, and an El Nino is when you have warmer than normal waters in the Eastern Pacific. That can alter that wind shear. Well, we have the opposite, and we have cooler than normal waters in the Eastern Pacific that lowers wind shear, and that should allow for not only more storms to develop, but they could be stronger. So when you combine all those ingredients, that's why they're calling for the forecasts that they are. So to be honest with you, I have never seen in my career, and ever since I've been tracking storms, this many so quick. I mean, we're already on P. We just had Nana make landfall in Belize this morning as a hurricane. Thankfully, Omar is doing nothing. It's what we call a fish storm. It's in the Atlantic doing nothing, so that's not going to impact any land. But we are going through names so fast that you're probably seeing names on this list that you probably aren't really familiar with, because I've had to add on the Greek alphabet. So you have the traditional names where it ends at Wilfred, but what happens if we run out of names? Well, we have to tap into the Greek alphabet, and that's alpha, beta, gamma, so on and so forth. We've only done that once before, and it was during the crazy 2005 season 15 years ago. That's when I evacuated for Rita. That's also when we had Katrina and when we had Wilma here in Southwest Florida. So we've only done that once, but I threw on the names because we're almost near the end of the list and we're about to run out. It's been that crazy of a season.
Matt, I do have a question.
Yes.
How do they come up with the names for the hurricanes?
So way back when, what they actually did is they didn't give it a name, and they would call it unknown hurricane or Hurricane 1. And then I'd say I believe it was about 1950, they started to call a lot of the storms just women. And, well, of course, what happened was the women were saying, hey, man, we don't want to be associated with a terrible destructive force. That's not fair. That's not fair. That's not fair. So then eventually down the road, they started to mix in men and women. So initially it wasn't the best start. Then they got some complaints, and they very fairly started to include men as well. And a lot of the origin of these names are both English and Spanish. So I don't know if you heard this one. It's about a few weeks ago. It was the one that skirted Florida. Isaias. That one, a lot of people had trouble pronouncing, and they were, saying it wrong. But that one does have Spanish origins, while other names are English. So, and because you gotta keep in mind that hurricanes, they impact the Caribbean, they impact the Gulf of Mexico, the Atlantic. It's only fair that we have a combination of Spanish and English names.
Yeah.
So that's the one reason why. So here's actually, so we talked about, let me go back here. We talked about the forecast with 24 tropical storms. And again, this is not set in stone. It could be more than this, could be less than this. 12 hurricanes and 5 major hurricanes. But, the one thing that I cannot stress enough, that I think what happens is people see these totals and they're thinking, oh my goodness, we're going to get hit. It's going to be a crazy season. And just because we have this forecast of 24 tropical storms, 12 hurricanes, 5 major hurricanes, that doesn't mean that every single one of those is going to come to Florida or hit the United States. And, here's a classic example from 2010. Take a quick swig here. So 2010 was a great example of an above average season, but that doesn't mean that they all went to the United States. And in fact, we did have powerful storms. We had a lot of storms, but Melissa, look where they went. Look at the pink lines. Those are the strongest storms. They didn't impact anybody. They curved out to sea.
I like those ones. Just hanging
Yeah,
out.
I love those too. Hurricanes are incredibly stressful. So if they don't bother me, then that's great. And in 2010, we had an above average season, quote unquote, but they curved out to sea and they really didn't bother anybody. Now, on the flip side, here's an example of a below average season. We had only 7 storms. We had only 4 hurricanes. But guess what one of the hurricanes was named? And it was a storm that we'll never forget. Andrew. Andrew was the only major hurricane during a below average amount of storms throughout the year. And Andrew was one of the strongest and most powerful storms that we've ever seen in modern history. So, the one thing is I don't want everybody to get caught up on the number of storms, because all it takes is one storm to make all the difference in the world. In 1992 with Hurricane Andrew, Category 5 at landfall is the greatest example of that. So what we can do is we can open it up to questions. Melissa, I also have, if you want, we have just some friendly reminders that if, heaven forbid, if we do have a hurricane come, there are several steps that you can do. You can first off determine your risk from storm surge, from inland flooding. Technically, tornadoes are going to be possible with any landfalling system. And then also determine your risk with strong winds. So, for example, if you have a home, do you have tall 30 or 40-foot pines near where you live that could crash into your home? That's another thing to factor in. How is the landscape of your home? Do you live kind of in an open field? Is it more rural? Is it more, built up? Do you have large trees nearby? So it wouldn't hurt to determine your risk. If you have to evacuate, especially if you live in a storm surge area, find out if you first off live in an evacuation zone. Plan your evacuation route. You want to follow evacuation orders, especially if you are under a mandatory evacuation, and plan for your pets. Now, the reason why you want to follow evacuation orders, because, for example, Melissa, if they say you're under a mandatory evacuation and you're saying, the heck with that, I don't want to evacuate, no big deal. Well, that also means that if you have an emergency and you're under a mandatory evacuation, the first responders, they are not required to come to your residence. Like during a mandatory evacuation, they're slammed with things that they got to do, and they are not required to come to your residence. You hope that they do, but especially during a mandatory evacuation, it's kind of, you fend for yourself, and you're kind of out on your own until they're not as bogged down with emergency services and they can come and help you. So that's another thing to factor in, if you do want to kind of stay around with a landfalling hurricane. Before the storm, assemble your disaster supplies, food and water, medicine, batteries, radio chargers. Want to gas up. I know we both found that out firsthand with our various hurricanes that we had to evacuate for. And then make sure that you have plenty of cash on hand. Get an insurance checkup. Check with your agent. Keep your documents with you. Consider flood insurance and know your policy. And then there are some things that you can do to strengthen your home. You can cover your windows, trim your trees. Again, because with strong winds, potentially over 80 to 100, those limbs can serve as flying projectiles that can go through your window, through your home. So, and same thing with if you don't secure loose outdoor items like patio furniture, those can be launched through the air and they can go into your windows, into your doors, you name it. And some other things that you should do beforehand: secure all doors, move your car to a safe location. Let's spread the love here. You can help your neighbors, especially the elderly, before, during, and after a storm. And make sure to complete a written plan, because as we saw, Melissa, remember with Hurricane Michael, these storms can pop up just like that, and they can develop in as much as 2 to 3 days.
Yep. Very good point. Well, that was a great presentation. Lots of information. I mean, I've lived in Southwest Florida since I was a kid, so I have experienced multiple hurricanes, but I still got a lot of information out of that and a lot of my questions that I had answered. So thank you. Some that I still do have, though, is what is the difference between a hurricane watch and a hurricane warning? I know you hear the two.
Okay, sure. So a hurricane watch is going to be issued if there's the possibility for a hurricane to make landfall about 2 to 3 days out. Now, if it sure enough remains the case that this hurricane is going to be heading your way, then within about 1 to 2 days, then it is going to be upgraded to a hurricane warning. And that's saying that hurricane conditions are expected, that you either A, need to prep for it, or B, you need to evacuate, especially if you live in a storm surge zone.
And when do you recommend that people start to board up their windows?
Well, you know, it's one of those where you obviously you want to prep as early as you can. Earlier the better, because, you know, think about it. If you do it 12 or 18 hours before the storm, you got so much going on, especially if you got a family, if you got pets, you got to take care of them. You know, do I have enough food? Do I have enough water? Especially if you're going to be hunkering down. So normally I have seen boarding up as early as 4 days out, but as late as a day out, you really don't want to do it the day of. There's just too much going on. But normally 1 to 4 days is kind of the range. You know, 4, if you get lucky and there's good model agreement and we know that it's going towards your area, but, you know, really no later than a day out.
Makes sense. So for those that have pets, is there anything specific that you can recommend that they do to prepare for the storm?
Just like people, make sure that they have adequate food as well as water. For our pets, it can sometimes be a very stressful time, and stressful for us too. So make sure that they are entertained. They have a place to, oh yeah, I'm glad you brought this up, Melissa. I know this seems weird, but I've heard of situations where this has been the case, and they've been very thankful that they did it beforehand. You can go to Home Depot and go to Lowe's, or if you want, you can cut up your own grass, but you literally can cut up a section of your sod and your grass, and you put it in the garage, and that's where your dog can kind of do their business instead of putting them outside in 80, 90, 100 mile per hour wind. You know, obviously don't want to do that for your poor dogs. Yeah. And that also can, I guess, make things a little bit cleaner so that way they don't do the business in the house. Yeah. So I have seen cases where people either beforehand, they'll buy some sod and some grass from Lowe's or Home Depot. Then they will either put it on their balcony. Like I live on the 20th floor. They put it on their balcony. They put it in their garage. So that way it kind of keeps the situation a little bit cleaner and maybe not as stinky as you go throughout a hurricane.
Sure. Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you for sharing.
Mm-hmm.
So for those that plan to go to a shelter, what items do you recommend that they bring with them? And also, have you heard anything about shelters now with COVID? Will there be as many or will there be more?
I heard that shelters will be available. No change there. It's just that we need to use the 2020 precautions. So for example, we need to socially distance 6 feet away. Absolutely bring multiple masks. Because think about it, you will be in a closed, confined space with a lot of people in a small area. But oftentimes the advantage of evacuating to a shelter is, and especially with schools, they are concrete and steel reinforced. You know, if you live in a mobile home, absolutely, I would recommend going to a shelter, because with a mobile home, that's one of the worst spots to be in. And I couldn't tell you, Melissa, how many pictures I saw just of last week with Laura, with mobile homes just getting just pushed aside and getting shredded apart. They can't deal with that type of wind.
Yeah.
And so if you live in a mobile home park, or if you know somebody in a mobile home, you really need to consider either evacuating or going to a shelter. And oftentimes with a lot of shelters, they wouldn't be recommended as shelters if they couldn't take the full force of a storm. But make sure that you have entertainment, supplies for the kids, Netflix. That's a great thing.
Yeah.
Make sure that you have, before you even leave, your electronics powered up. Make sure with your phone, just like with mine, that you keep it in a lower screen power setting, so that way you can conserve your power as much as you can, because we don't know how long you're going to be without power. And that phone could be critical, especially for contacting loved ones, friends, family. Make sure that the kids have board games, entertainment, anything, food, water, medication, stuff like that. But I do recommend a shelter, but we need to use 2020 precautions here, and we socially distance and make sure to have a mask.
Yeah. So actually, I do have one final question for you.
Sure.
It's not weather related.
Yes.
But I see you have quite the following on Facebook. And
Thank you.
Realtors, they love getting tips on social media.
Right.
So what is your advice for those wanting to gain a following and more of a presence on social media?
And growing Facebook and Twitter and all that stuff?
Yeah.
Okay, so crazy thing is, what was it, 2013 or 2012, I believe, is when I developed that Facebook page. And I started with one, and it was my mom.
Aww.
And I started with my mom. She's always been my number one fan and my greatest support, and I would be nothing without her. She has provided me the tools, the resources to do what I love, and also as a meteorologist to get out my forecasting, but also my opinion when it comes to should you evacuate, how strong is a storm. And long story short, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, they serve as a medium to get that message out. Well, through trial and error over the years, I have found things that work, and then there are things that don't work. So, for example, this is completely true. I have seen where I have a tornado warning in my area. I share it on Facebook. 12 likes, 10 shares, big deal. I share an adorable puppy picture, 1,000 likes, 100 shares. And it's interesting to see how people treat different things. But through the years, I have found what works and what doesn't work. So, for example, I'd be more than happy to share just one of the many little tricks. And this only works on Facebook. On Facebook, let me show you a classic example. We'll kind of go a little off script here. Okay, so for example, this is my 10-day forecast. I don't know what the resolution, if you can see it. Okay, right there. Okay, so notice how on my phone, this horizontal image is only taking up a portion of my phone.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so when it comes to information, I believe the percentage is 83%. When people need information, they look at their phone. Now, 10 years ago, it was TV. So, for example, let's say you're on Facebook and you see this image. Does that really stand out to you? In your opinion?
No.
Exactly, and it's okay to say that, but it's all about how you get across the information. So this is a horizontal image. Let me show you something else that I shared today. And it'll kind of make a little bit more sense for how you can try to attract a bigger crowd. Okay, so I'm saving it right here. So what I like to do also is mix humor with information.
Yeah.
So here's a picture that I shared on, it says Florida waiting for a cold front, and it shows a skeleton because it's taken for frickin' ever to get to a cold front in cooler weather. And you'll see that my heat index today is 110. So if you're looking at your phone, Melissa, I chose to make my image more vertical. Because it's more vertical, it takes more of your iPhone or your Android and therefore is more eye-catching than the other horizontal image. So long story short is, if I want something to be eye-catching, I make my image more vertical than horizontal. Now, I've done some analytics, and based off of that, the more vertical that you make it, like let's say it's the same image, but you try to make it more vertical, it does 3 times better. So 3 times more likes, 3 times more shares than it would be if it was a horizontal image. And that's because it's more eye-catching.
That's a great
it grabs people's attention.
Yeah.
But it also depends on what you're sharing. Now, if it's something boring or if it's not very catchy, it's not going to do well. But if it's humor, or if it's breaking news, or if it's something about your life, whether it's an engagement, kids, wedding, adorable pets, adorable dogs, cats, babies, you name it, those are the big sellers, and that's what people love. And so I started with the one, my mom, and it's crazy to think, I think as of this morning, I'm at 425,000.
Yeah.
And I never in a million years thought it would get like that, but I'm very grateful. I'm very thankful for everybody that has nice things to say and they support me, and I'm very down to earth. So it's even me, I get overwhelmed by it.
And you can tell by looking at your feed, honestly, Matt. I mean, I've never met you before today, but just by looking at your feed, like I could see that. And it's funny.
Yeah.
My sister, she lives in upstate New York, Syracuse, New York, and she follows you. And I see that she's always liking your stuff as well. So,
I've had some, I kid you not, in Antarctica. One guy was on a research project. He liked my picture from Antarctica. I had one in, I had a handful in Australia, New Zealand, India, literally all over the world. And it's just amazing how, especially with, if you guys want to continue to grow your brand and your Facebook page, and I mean, you literally have the power to connect to not only people in Florida, but the United States and also the world. I mean, that's the cool thing. But nowadays, you can reach out to anybody, you know? So but that's at least just one of the hints I'd be more than happy to provide. It also depends on what you're using. Like, for example, Facebook's good with a vertical image. Twitter, I don't know if you guys are big with Twitter, but Twitter is actually the exact opposite. If you do vertical, it cuts off the image. But if you do more horizontal, let's see if you can see that. This is my Twitter. The horizontal does better.
I've noticed that on there.
So see, look at my image. It's the same one, but you can only see you can only see the top of the skeleton's head. So it doesn't do as better. So it's all about finding that medium that you want to use and then going with it. Instagram, if you want to grow your Instagram, I am definitely not like some have like millions and millions and millions of followers.
You have quite a few on there too, though. I checked.
I have 10,000, but like Kevin Hart and The Rock, they got like 100 million. It's crazy. Yeah. It's crazy. But same thing with Instagram, hashtag stuff. So that way you can be found, your content can be found. You can attach @ symbols to whoever you want to reach. Sometimes they can repost your stuff. So that's another way to grow your brand. And it's also, you want to find the happy medium of not sharing too many stories, but also sharing stories, so that way people can get to know you and develop that base. And again, the fun thing with social media, Melissa, is you kind of just find your happy medium, like what works and what doesn't work, and stuff like that.
Yeah, there's a lot of photos of the sky recently. There's been some crazy stuff with lightning, and
I know.
What's going on? Is that normal?
And of course, I'm a huge weather geek, so like I totally eat that up. I love it. But a lot of it is this time of the year, you get just so much power and so much energy in the atmosphere, especially with lightning. You just electrify the sky. You can go from cloud to ground, cloud to cloud to cloud, cloud to ground, cloud to Gulf of Mexico, you name it. And then depending on the situation, you can get a lot of different cloud patterns. The best way to think about, Melissa, the sky, it's almost like the ocean. It's like, it's a fluid. So you can get rising air, you can get sinking air, and that creates all these crazy different cloud patterns that we can see during a given day. Like, have you ever seen the like during our summer storms, you see the ones that almost look like bombs? That is strictly hot air that's shooting up, cooling and condensing, and then forming rain. It's almost like, it's a classic example. It's like, so let's say you have a cold bottle of water and you take it outside when it's like super hot. What happens to the cold bottle of water? You start to get the condensation, and then your fingers get wet. It's the same thing that's happening up in the atmosphere. The hot air down near the ground is lifting and it's cooling just like the water bottle does outside, and it's forming the rain just like the condensation would have on the side of the bottle. So that's why we get all those crazy pictures that you see in Florida and across the world.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing all of those, and thank you for being a part of this today.
Yeah, absolutely. And really, Melissa, thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.